from Taylor61. We're talking about COVID-19 vaccination or talking about COVID-19 disease itself increase the child anxiety.
Oh, that's an interesting question.
It's about mental health.
Depends. Yeah, it's about mental health. So this really depends on the child. So if you know you have a sensitive child, broach the topic slowly. If you have a normal kid, no issues whatsoever, tell them in an age-appropriate way. So if you have a 2-year-old, you're not going to tell them, do you know what COVID-19 is? You're going to die. Everybody's going to die. You don't tell that to a 2-year-old. But when you have an older child, you want to talk to them at an age-appropriate way. So it doesn't humiliate them. They're like, Mom, I'm already 13. You're telling me this like I'm 5. I know what's happening. So you want to make sure that you speak to them age-appropriately. And if you have a child that's already a little bit more sensitive, broach the topic slowly. Reassure them, guys, this is happening. We're all in this together. We will come out of this. Don't worry. And if you find that they're broken down when you're in the midst of explaining it to them, I think it's important for you to just stop, pause, take a minute, let your child regain his feelings. Let your child know what he's feeling. You can always postpone that conversation to another time when the child feels much more better mentally, physically, health-wise. When the child feels, okay, Mom, I think I'm ready to have this conversation again. So ask them, speak to them, let them be ready to talk about this. So don't force information onto a child that they may not understand for whatever age that they're in. Or if they're not interested to know, then just leave it, because it's good enough that we know what's happening. But even for adults, you can get triggered. Like there's so many of my friends who are getting triggered with the numbers that are happening every day. So even a child can be triggered when they see, like my daughter asked me, 13,000 yesterday. Mommy, isn't the number supposed to go down, not go up? I'm like, yeah, we're all hoping for the numbers to go down. So you know that children are aware, but you don't want them to be triggered by this. So just reassure them and go with the flow.
Yeah, I agree with you, Rakhee. I feel that very important thing is to see and to filter what they see from the net. Sometimes there are videos about bodies and very nasty videos about COVID infections. People get ventilated. I think it's really affect their mental health.
Absolutely.
But I have another question from what is mom cooking, which is at what age a child can easily get COVID?
Unfortunately, what is mom cooking? It can happen at any age. I just had a newborn come in and unfortunately the child got infected from a parent who was not working from home. So it can happen at any age. It can happen to anyone. So it's not any particular age. And if you remember the statistics that I quoted earlier, the numbers were actually throughout 0 till, newborn period till 17 years old. So unfortunately, it can happen at any age.
Yeah. I think it's just the older teenagers is the one that have all the symptoms, right? It can mimic how adults have COVID-19.
Not necessarily. The older teens mimic the immune response to adults, but the signs and symptoms can remain very non-specific. And like I mentioned earlier, most of them are asymptomatic, but some of them can progress to complications later.
Okay. All right. There's another interesting question by Tarrant Ock. I think the question is, why can't children receive vaccination? I think he's talking about children maybe less than 12.
Yeah. So as of today, we have children who are less than 12 years old who cannot be vaccinated. But studies are still ongoing for this group of children. Pfizer is actually doing another 2 more stage trials where they're looking at 5 to 11 years old and then below 4 years old as well. So these are 2-stage studies. The reason why we're not just blanket opening like how adults is because children vary in size. The different ages, different weights. We need to make sure that they get the right doses, the right amount is going in. Whether a single dose is just actually enough to provide the same booster effect or whether they need 2 doses. Do they need 2 doses of the same amount of vaccine or do they need a smaller amount of that vaccine? For instance, if they're getting 1 milligram, I'm just throwing a number, this is not accurate. So if they're getting 1 milligram in adults, do we need to cut that number to 0.5? So these are all being studied at the moment, but results are quite encouraging, the preliminary tests that are coming out, and we hope to see some of these results out by September, October this year. So then Malaysia will follow suit and start vaccinating the 5 and above, but we'll wait for official statements and for official publications to come out. So hang in there, parents row. We will hopefully be able to vaccinate the children soon.
Yeah. Still on vaccination, I have one question that popped in, which is like, hi doctor, my 13 years old girl underwent her heart operation last year. Is it safe for her to go for the vaccination?
Well, it depends. So your 13-year-old girl with a heart operation, I would say she's got some sort of heart problem. I would definitely discuss it with my cardiologist, get a personal aspect, because disclaimer, whatever that I'm saying here is not personal medical advice. So it'll be best if you approach your cardiologist and get a pre-vaccine assessment form just to make sure. But a side note here that there are studies to show for, I don't know what your child has, but if it is a congenital heart disease, there is no contraindication. So if you have a child who's got some sort of congenital heart disease, there's no contraindication to the vaccine. But if your child does have any medical problems, please see your regular physicians to get an accurate personal-based medical advice rather than just, everybody is the same kind of advice.
All right. Okay, going back to the next question, Rakhee. From Taylor61, what tests are done if the child is suspected to have COVID? I think he's talking apart from the swab test.
Well, the gold standard is a nasopharyngeal swab, which is basically nose and mouth, right? So nasopharyngeal swab, and we know that we want to do the RT-PCR or the reverse transcriptase polymerase chain reaction. That's a mouthful, so that's why we always just say PCR test. So PCR test is the gold standard because that gives us a CT value and that gives us an accurate amount, even if it's a smaller viral load. The next test that you can think about, especially in Klang Valley, because our viral load is very high, our community viral load is extremely high, you can actually think of doing an antigen test. So an antigen test is much faster to detect. The PCR sometimes takes up to 24 to 48 hours before you get a result, but the antigen test is much faster. Sometimes within a few hours, 1 to 4 hours, you already get your result. So these are the two tests that we actually do at the moment since the beginning of the pandemic. However, there is a new home-based test self-kit that actually came out, which is the saliva test. The accuracy in terms of sensitivity and all is still a little bit debatable, but it is something that you can actually look at for the future, and I'm waiting for more data on that, but it looks quite promising. Saliva, which is basically deep throat saliva, taking it out. So for children, maybe stringing out the saliva would be a possibility. So it's something like a pregnancy test. You take the saliva, you drop it in, and then you see yourself, are you double line or single line, So that's a future that is coming soon, I think, if it hasn't already landed.
And we can do it at home, and it's
not invasive. These are home-based self-test kits, or even in GP, certain clinics, they will be able to have that as well.
Yeah, it is. The thought is good. Not scary thought as if you're waiting for your swab. All right. The next question is from Gerald Minengo. Wow, this is interesting. What is the reinfection risk in children?
Oh wow, that's a good question, Jared. So we know that reinfection should be differentiated from secondary medical conditions. So whether this child has a reinfection or whether it's something completely different, he's just having another medical condition, this needs to be differentiated. Or is this just persistent virus in the viral particle in the respiratory sample? We now know that the respiratory sample can be positive for a few weeks after you've tested positive. So sometimes it could be that also, which means it's something like a false positive. For children, the risk of reinfection is very, very small, but there are, and it can happen. I think there was one study that showed that it usually happens between 10 to 27 days post an infection. Very, very small risk, but it can happen. So that's the reason why we want to get ourselves vaccinated, so we reduce the risk of you getting all sorts of reinfections or variants to the first infection. But it's very small for children.
All right. We have two questions here from Christine Valerie. How do we cope as adults with children being at home and working from home?
Oh, Christine, I feel you. I so feel you. It's very important to remember self-care. I came across self-care about 2 years back when I thought it was wrong for me as a mother to take time out and do something for myself. It is not. If you need to take a break, take a break. If you need to take a drive alone in the car. Don't mess up with the SOPs. Take a drive. If you need to take a drive, take a drive. Talk to your spouse, speak to someone about it, and see how you can help each other. So if you're married, you have a partner, you have kids, talk to your partner and ask him or her, how are we going to do this? We're both working from home, or one is working, one is not. How do we manage our kids? I need a break. Work out a schedule between the two of you so you don't stress each other out, because we do know that adults who are angry with kids take it out on each other, take it out on the kids. So self-care, very important. Coming up with some sort of routine with your partner is maybe helpful. Exercise. Take a little bit of time out in your day. You've got 24 hours. You just need 20 to 30 minutes a day to just exercise. Take a run, go for a run, do some yoga, do some stretches, do some Pilates for those who are into Pilates. These are all helpful ways. Meditate is for some, it can calm your nerves down. It can give you some sort of focus. Basically, take care of your health. Take the time out. Nobody is finding fault with anybody, and nobody will judge you. So always remember, you come first, your family comes first. Take the time that you need. Thank you for asking that. It's not really mentioned very much.
And Valerie, Christine also asking the same another question. What are the most notable impact of COVID-19 on children?
What is the most notable? Oh, this is multi-pronged. So as I've mentioned, if you've been listening for the past half an hour, there's so many things that can affect children. Socially, mentally, nutritionally. Like I mentioned, 4 million children are not even getting a proper meal. We are more worried about whether my child has an iPad. First world problems. There are children out there who don't even have food on their table. They are living the B40 group. We're doing all we can, but how many white flags can come up before the government does anything? Educational wise, physical, health. Oh, this is multi-pronged, Christine. There's so many aspects to this that I could go on and on for another hour just to talk about how it has affected children in many ways. The most notable aspect, I think, for a lot of us is social. Kids are just missing their friends. Kids are missing their teachers. My kids miss their teachers very much. They miss their family. They miss their cousins. They miss their grandparents. And you have an ill grandparent, or if you have an ill uncle or auntie, that's also something that's so sad. If you have relatives that are outside of Malaysia, I personally have a brother who's in Singapore and I haven't met him in more than a year. So these are all things that children feel. They can break down and cry because socially they're not getting that stimulation that they used to get from not just the parents. Sometimes kids need an external person, a grandparent or an aunt, to give them the support that they may need, or they may be closer to another person compared to their mother or their father. But that's absolutely fine. It's just that they're not seeing that person anymore, and this could affect them in many, many ways.
All right.
Interesting, but there's so many aspects to that question. Sorry, I have a question from...
So many questions, Rakhee. I just got one question, interesting question here.
Sorry, Azhar, just to take this question. Can a mom who's positive COVID-19 breastfeed baby or give breast pump milk to baby? Wonderful question. Whoever gave me that question, I think it's very important for you to note that you have to continue breastfeeding, provided you wear a mask, wash your hands before and after you feed, keep the child, you breastfeed, whether it's pumping direct latch or you're pumping and giving it via bottle, continue to breastfeed. There was a recent study, the inter-COVID study, that actually looked at COVID-19 positive pregnant mothers, and it showed that only 13% of the infants were positive, right? So after delivery. So that's a very small amount. And subsequently, the ones that were positive were higher in the non-breastfeeding group. So breast milk confers some amount of antibody. This is being thoroughly investigated. But to all my breastfeeding mamas out there, please don't pump and dump. Please continue vaccination, breastfeeding. And I'm also going to add on this to those who want to get their vaccine. If you're breastfeeding, please go ahead and get your vaccine. Just mandi lah once you come back from the vaccine center. Bathe nicely, continue breastfeeding. Don't interrupt your breastfeeding in any way. So I'd just like to mention that.
All right, there's another question here. For a child with allergic eczema or allergic to egg mainly, is Pfizer vaccine safe for them?
Yes, go ahead. So if you have an allergy, please note it down to the doctor when you get consent and things like that. And usually we observe you for 30 minutes rather than the usual 15 minutes. However, If you have had an anaphylaxis, which means a severe allergic reaction, it will be best for you to get a pre-vaccination, a PVA patient assessment from your physician, just to certify that you can get the vaccine and where you should get the vaccine. So if you have strong allergies, you have multiple allergies, it will be best for you to get your vaccination in a hospital or a clinic base rather than in a center base, like one of those mega PPVs and things like that. It'll be best for you to get your vaccination in a hospital base. So like Ara Damansara has our own vaccination center. So if you are, if you have some sort of medical issue or allergies, we definitely prefer you to come to a hospital or clinic base to get your vaccination.
All right. We continue to the next question.
Yeah.
Well, it's from Taylor61. Is there an increase in infection in second wave in children?
Okay, so simple answer to that is yes, unfortunately, because of variants. So the longer the virus remains in the population, there'll be more and more and more variants, right? So that's why I mentioned the difference between variants of concern and variants of interest. Variants of interest, there are so many, there are about like 5 or 6 already out there, and we just hope that these variants mutate and die and kill themselves, but unfortunately not all the time. So yes, we are seeing an increase in numbers, and we are seeing a rise in number of cases. It's mainly because of the variants, because they are increased transmissibility. So yes, the easy answer to that would be yes. Unfortunately, we are seeing a rise in cases.
Are the symptoms different during the second wave?
Yes, slightly. So we realized that the incubation period is shorter. Previously, we used to fill up those forms that says in the last 14 days, have you been here, have you traveled? But now it's like I could be in contact with someone positive yesterday and I developed symptoms today. So incubation period has reduced. We are seeing more severe symptoms faster. And in children, we have seen quite a few that develop MIS-C. So yes, symptoms are also changing and becoming nastier. So unfortunately, until we get a good herd immunity, I think it's very important in that sense.
I receive a lot of questions regarding reinfection. Another one is from Blake Pipes at Yahoo. Just curious, let's say a person was positive and recovered, can the person get reinfected again? I guess, in children's point of view.
So they can get reinfected. We do know that the antibody response to a post-natural infection, which means you're not vaccinated, you got the infection naturally, it wanes over time. And there were some studies that actually showed that the antibody levels disappeared within the first 3 months. So that's why it's very important that even though you have been diagnosed to be COVID-19 positive, it is important for you to get the vaccine as soon as possible, as soon as you're well again. You don't have to wait a certain number of periods, a certain number of days or whatever. The moment you're well, go get your vaccine, provided you are well. If you're still unwell, postpone the date until you feel much better again. In our My Sejahtera system, I think they postpone your appointment by 30 days. So whenever you click postpone your appointment, it will say you will be getting an appointment within the next 30 days. So if you have a natural infection, if you have been positive before, this goes for adults as well, not only for children. Please make sure you get vaccinated as well, because variants keep forming. If you've been infected, you may not have been infected by the variant, you may have been infected by one, but you can still get another version of it. So they keep forming, and the only way we now know to prevent this is by getting vaccinated. The bigger population that has been vaccinated, the bigger herd immunity, the better it is.
Good. We have actually tons of questions coming, Rakhee. You're famous.
Yeah.
Anyway, we have a few more minutes left, but I think this is good about doctors' health and safety assessment. Parents are worried, about child attending in-person school, daycare, kindergarten, nursery, they're joining their learning activities. Should they go to school or should they not go to school? What are your thoughts?
At this point in Klang Valley, unfortunately, nobody is going to be going anywhere anytime soon. So I doubt the schools are going to be open. Especially since we have a rise in number of cases and a slur of clusters. I don't think schools are going to be able to open safely. We need to still wait for Ministry of Education's guidelines that we have been preparing that with many stakeholders, including the Malaysian Paediatric Association. So many of us have actually come up with these guidelines, and we'll just wait for MOE to release these to schools so that they are able to prepare before they just buka terus and everybody can come again. So we need to prepare before we allow schools to reopen. As to whether we should send them to school or not, I think it's a very personal decision. If you're a parent and you have a 3-year-old that you can manage at home, keep the child at home. There's no necessity to send to school. At this point, you have to balance out socializing versus whether you want to keep your child healthy. You need to balance whether your child should know ABCs between a certain number of age, versus your child being healthy at home. So for me, my priority with my kids is, as long as they're home, as long as they're safe, they're healthy, that's my number one priority. We can still learn, we can still socialize, we can still maintain social, Zoom apps or whatever to talk to our family and friends, but at least our children are with us, rather than they being exposed. So it's a very personal decision. If you have a place where they have very strict SOPs in place, very few children, then I don't see why not sending them. So I think it's a very personal decision at this point, but I highly doubt schools are going to be open in the next 1 month or so, especially since we're in EMCO, in our third EMCO in Klang Valley.
Yeah, good, Dr. Rakhee. So I think we have 5 more minutes to go. Maybe we talk about, parents want to know, any tips that you can advise for children 2 to 4 years old to keep their mask in play school?
Sorry, just a minute. No, already answered. Yeah. Tips to get them vaccinated. Yeah. Was that the question?
Tips to get them wearing masks all the time for 2 to 4 years old. Maybe a simple tips, because kids listen to the doctors,
masks,
not their parents.
Okay, yeah. So tips to wear masks. Oh, so many tips. Choose the cartoon mask, right? So there's so many on online shopping that you can get. Get the cartoon that they love. Get a few varieties. Get a mask that fits them. Don't get the adult mask for your children if it's going to be all loose and everywhere. The child won't be comfortable wearing it. Wear a mask yourself. Children love to follow what the parents do, and when they see a parent doing it, they're automatically like, Mama, I want one too. So wear it yourself. Explain to the child the purpose of masks, right? Having said that, I'm just going to mention here that the American Academy of Pediatrics says that masking should be for 2 years and above. So for below 2 years old, if your child doesn't want a mask, you don't really have to force it. I do see a lot of parents coming in with the face shield and all that. That's not absolute protection, but it's something rather than nothing. So no harm in wearing that. But you must remember that following the SOPs are still very important. When you come for a medical visit or whatever, go back home and just have a bath. But just a couple of tips would be to wear them yourself, get cartoon masks, get various colored masks, and make sure they fit snugly so they don't irritate the face. Some children have a bit of eczema or allergies around the face. You might want to maybe put emollients or moisturizer around the face. So before you don a mask, and encourage them to wear a mask throughout whatever period in school they are in. So give praises. Once again, positive reinforcement, very important for children. There was a question actually, Azhar, why are children less susceptible to getting COVID-19?
Yeah, I was about to ask you that question. I personally wanted to know why children are less severe than adults. What makes them so protected?
There's no single explanation to this. This is something that has puzzled many scientists and researchers. I can just say that children are very well equipped to respond to new viruses. And the easy answer to this is children's immune system sees a virus. They mount a very quick and effective immune response that shuts it down before it even has a chance to come up positive on a swab test. So sometimes children who go and get a swab test, it comes out negative, but actually a few days later it comes back positive. And even children who develop MIS-C, the complication, the swab test positivity rate in these children is actually only between 30 to 50%. Right? So that's one of the things. Second thing is children develop antibodies to spike proteins. So if you remember the shape of, I think everybody knows what a coronavirus looks like. It's like that round tennis ball with a lot of spikes on the top. So they develop antibodies to the spike proteins. Adults develop antibodies to the spike proteins as well as a nucleocapsid protein, which is usually released when there's widespread disease. So children look they lack this particular antibody. Usually which basically suggests that some of them are not experiencing widespread disease. So this is also another a good sign. Children are also the main reservoir for certain seasonal coronaviruses. We do know that COVID-19 is not the only type of coronaviruses, and these normal seasonal ones are the usual ones that cause the common cold. So some research has actually claimed that these antibodies might confer some protection, but the evidence for this is still very mixed. So we've got lots of different evidence, but these could, all in all come up together and explain to us why. And finally, children have fewer ACE2 receptors. So what are ACE2 receptors? So this is basically what the virus needs to gain access into cells. Let's imagine this like a lock and key situation. You've got like a lot of pencuri outside the house and a lock and key. If you have a lock, you have the key, you can open it, pencuri boleh masuk lah. So the pencuri is the virus in this case. Alright, the ACE2 receptor is the lock. And the spike protein on the virus, on the COVID-19 surface, is the key. Once they combine, it actually allows entry into the cell where it subsequently replicates and then it travels all over the body, causing the disease. Children do not have this lock as much as adults. So kalau tak ada kunci, if there's no lock and you have a bunch of keys, you can't do anything. So having a bunch of keys is not going to help that virus. Having a bunch of spike proteins is not going to help that virus to enter any cell because there's no receptor for it to cling onto, right? So this is one of the main reasons why we say children don't really get infected much. It's because there's so many aspects of it, and children's immune system is actually very robust. So we always feel like, anak kita, no lah, very poor immune, very poor, but no, all our children have a robust immune response. And this is one of the reasons why children don't get infected as easily as adults.
All right. Thank you, Rakhee. Okay, thank you for your very informative thoughts. One last, I promise you this is the last question. Not the last question. I want you to share, are there any tips on bringing your child for vaccination? We are preparing everything for them, right? In future, there will be a vaccination started for children. So is there any tip? Because you give jab for them almost every day. So is there any tips that is good for the parents to know about how to vaccinate?
I love that question. I've come up with a bunch of do's and don'ts for parents to actually follow. And so the do's, I'll go through the do's first and then I'll mention the don'ts. So the do's are, do prep them. Do tell them that they're going for a vaccination. Do tell them what the vaccine is for. It's going to make you stronger. You're going to get a little needle. It might be a little bit painful. You might not feel anything. Do talk them through it. Explain what is going to happen. Explain the process. We're going to go here. We're going to fill up some forms. We're going to see a nurse. We're going to see a doctor. We're going to be observed for a few minutes. And then after that, allow them to choose where they want to go and makan lah after that. Let them decide what is the food that they're of choice for them. Let them decide, for all the kids especially, let them decide the clothes that they want to, provided that at least the arm can be easily accessed for the vaccination. Allow them to decide a plaster. Bring along their favorite cartoon character, their favorite princess for girls, and I personally brought my own princess along for my own vaccination. So bring along your own plasters, bring a water bottle for them, so these are a couple of do's. Prepare some Panadol on standby, but don't give Panadol before a vaccination. We never treat something that does not have any symptoms yet, so don't give them before, but prepare the Panadol on standby in case after that they develop some sort of side effect, a headache, some fever, at least you have it on standby. Let them rest. This is something I want to stress to all parents out there. Let them rest. Give them a break from online classes or whatever other classes they may have. Give them a break. Don't force them, right? Attend the second appointment. Do attend the second appointment. Make sure you go for your second appointment, so don't miss that as well, because we now know that single dose may not give full protection against certain variants, but we know that double dose is really good, right? So the don'ts, I'm going to move on to the don'ts. Don't lie to your child. Don't say, we're going to go tapao food, we're going to go and pack some food, and then you go and bring them to get their vaccination. Like, surprise, you're going to see your doctor today,
Yeah.
Don't lie to them. Don't force feed. We know some of our moms, they'll prepare porridge, they'll prepare all these soups and everything. Kids are kids. They just want to have comfort food. So if the child says, Mommy, I want to have a Kit Kat after this, I want to have some chocolates, go ahead, give them the treat that they deserve. They've done wonderfully for the nation and for themselves by getting vaccinated. Don't do strenuous exercises for at least a week after. So if they're one of those boys who like to lift weights and things like that, probably hang on for about a week. But if more than welcome to do light stretches, some yoga, meditation, or whatnot for a week after your vaccination, both first and second dose. Don't force them to attend classes. I've already mentioned this. And don't organize post-vaccine parties. Like, hey, your kid's vaccinated, my kid's vaccinated, we've got a couple of kids in our neighborhood, let's all have a post-vaccine party. Don't do that, right? Because you're not fully vaccinated, not fully protected until they've completed 2 doses in 2 weeks after that. And of course, don't forget to maintain SOPs as long as we have not got proper herd immunity in our country. So we want more of our population to be vaccinated before we can actually say, okay, let's unmask. Okay, we don't need to worry about social distancing. For now, even if you are vaccinated, please wear the mask, please maintain physical distancing, please follow the public health measures in place. So these are just a couple of my do's and don'ts for parents to guide them and help them to get their children vaccinated. Oh, and for older children who have their own phones, register them separately for the vaccination, because in the future when they go off and all that, you want them to have their own phone with their own license, the certificate and everything. But of course, if you have younger children and they're linked with you, then no harm in getting them dependent registration.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Rakhee. I think we have a very informative day today. We've talked about the COVID-19 infection. We've talked about, the rate of infections among our children. We discussed about the sign symptoms at all ages. And then we touched on the tips on vaccination and the importance of vaccination, the side effect that we look out. We have discussed about the red flags. And then we have discussed about tips on sending them to school and what should be done at school. I know we have tons of questions that have not to be answered, but I think we will reply to that later. All right, thank you, Dr. Rakhee, for having, for your time today. For all the listeners, do look out for our next Doc Talk by EDMC. We will post it on our Facebook page, and do look out for it. Till then, stay safe, get your vaccination for adults, and bye-bye.
Thank you, Azza, for the invite. Bye, take care.